Part 1. The stars had always been a source of wonder for every species that looked up at the night sky. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had mapped every corner of the known universe. They had discovered countless worlds, met hundreds of intelligent species, and created a vast network of civilizations that stretched across 12 galaxies. But there was one place that remained untouched, one galaxy that no one dared to enter. The Milky Way galaxy stood alone, marked with warning symbols on every star map in Council space. Commander Zixthar stood in his private quarters aboard the science vessel Pathfinder, studying an ancient data crystal he had found on a forgotten world. The crystal was old, perhaps 10,000 cycles old, and it contained partial records from the last expedition that had tried to enter the Milky Way. Zixthar had spent months piecing together the fragments, trying to understand what had happened to those brave explorers who had ventured into the Forbidden Zone. The Krellian commander was young for his position, only 32 cycles old, but he had proven himself to be brilliant and daring. His superiors in the Krellian Empire had promoted him quickly, impressed by his ability to solve problems that others considered impossible. But they also worried about his curiosity, his tendency to question old rules and ancient warnings. Zixthar had requested permission to study the Milky Way from a safe distance, and after much debate, the Council had reluctantly agreed. His crew consisted of 20 scientists and explorers, all handpicked for their expertise and their open minds. They had been traveling for weeks, moving slowly toward the edge of the Forbidden Zone. Every day, Zixthar would gather his senior staff to discuss their findings and plan their next moves. His second-in-command, a cautious officer named Veltar, had expressed concerns about their mission from the very beginning. The data crystal revealed something strange in its final entries. The ancient explorers had not been destroyed by weapons or killed by some hostile force. Instead, their logs spoke of confusion and fear. They had encountered something they could not understand, something that had shaken them so deeply that they had fled back to Council space. The final entry was brief and cryptic. It spoke of a species that showed both terrible violence and unexpected kindness, a combination that the explorers found deeply disturbing. Zixthar called a meeting with his senior staff. The conference room was small but comfortable, designed for long discussions and difficult decisions. Around the table sat Veltar, the chief scientist Miran, the tactical officer Kresh, and the cultural specialist Linra. Each of them had been studying different aspects of the Milky Way, trying to understand why it had been declared forbidden. Miran spoke first, her voice filled with excitement. She had been analyzing energy signatures from the edge of the galaxy, and what she had found was remarkable. The Milky Way was not empty or dead. It was filled with activity, with countless ships moving between star systems, with communication signals bouncing across vast distances. There were dozens of spacefaring species living and working in the galaxy, conducting trade and diplomacy just like anywhere else in the known universe. Kresh, the tactical officer, had been studying the military aspects of the region. What he had discovered was puzzling. There were no massive fleets, no obvious superweapons, no signs of the terrible danger that the ancient warnings had described. The species in the Milky Way seemed to have normal military forces, nothing exceptional or particularly advanced. If anything, their technology appeared to be slightly behind the standard galactic level. Linra, the cultural specialist, had been monitoring communications and broadcasts from various species in the galaxy. She had learned to translate several of their languages, and what she had heard was fascinating. The different species in the Milky Way spoke about a central region of space with a mixture of respect and caution. They called it the human sector, and they all seemed to agree on one thing. The humans were not to be disturbed. Zixthar listened to all of this with growing fascination. A species called humans, living on a small planet called Earth, somehow commanded respect from dozens of more advanced civilizations. This made no sense according to everything the Council knew about galactic politics. Advanced species did not defer to primitive ones. Power came from technology, from military might, from economic strength. Yet here was a pre-warp civilization that seemed to hold a special position in their galaxy. Veltar urged caution. The ancient warnings existed for a reason, he argued. Just because they could not see the danger did not mean it was not there. They should report their findings to the Council and let others decide what to do next. But Zixthar was too curious to turn back now. They had come all this way, and they were finally on the edge of solving a mystery that had puzzled the galaxy for thousands of years. The commander made his decision. They would enter the Milky Way, but they would do so carefully. They would keep their weapons powered down and their shields set to defensive mode only. They would observe from a distance and avoid contact with any species they encountered. If they saw any sign of real danger, they would retreat immediately. The crew agreed, though some were more nervous than others about violating the ancient prohibition. As the Pathfinder crossed the boundary into forbidden space, the crew held their breath. They expected alarms, attacks, or some kind of automatic defense system to activate. Instead, nothing happened. The stars looked the same as they did everywhere else. Space was just space, empty and vast and beautiful. The crew began to relax, thinking that perhaps the ancient fears had been exaggerated or misunderstood. They traveled deeper into the galaxy, following trade routes and watching ships move between systems. Zixthar ordered passive scans only, not wanting to draw attention to their presence. They learned more about the various species that called the Milky Way home. There were the Centaurians, a peaceful trading race, the Kepler Collective, a group of artificial intelligences, the Proxima clans, a warrior culture that valued honor above all else, and at the center of it all, the humans. The Pathfinder moved carefully toward the human sector, staying at a safe distance but getting close enough to observe. What they saw confused them even more. The humans had primitive ships that used chemical rockets and early fusion drives. Their weapons were simple kinetic projectiles and basic energy weapons. Their cities, while impressive for their level of development, showed no signs of advanced technology. These were people who had barely left their own solar system. Yet every species they had monitored gave the human system a wide berth. Trade ships would detour around human space, adding days to their journeys rather than pass through it. Military patrols would stop at the edge of the sector and go no further. Zixthar intercepted a conversation between two Proxima warships, and what he heard made his blood run cold. One captain was warning another about getting too close to Earth. The words were simple but chilling. "Never underestimate the humans," the captain said. "They do not know they are dangerous, which makes them more dangerous still." Zixthar stared at the view screen, watching the small blue planet that orbited a yellow star. Somewhere down there, billions of humans lived their lives, unaware that the entire galaxy watched them with cautious respect. He needed to understand why. He needed to know what made these primitive people so special, so feared. Against all his training and all the ancient warnings, Zixthar made a decision that would change everything. He ordered his ship to move closer to Earth, to begin detailed scans of the planet and its people. The crew protested, but the commander was firm. They had come too far to turn back now. They would find the truth, whatever it might be. Part 2 Lieutenant Jake Morrison had been staring at his screen for 3 hours straight. The coffee in his mug had gone cold long ago, but he barely noticed. Something was out there, something that should not be there, and his instruments kept insisting it was real. Jake worked at Watchtower 7, a deep space monitoring station that orbited beyond Neptune. His job was to watch for asteroids, comets, and other natural objects that might pose a threat to Earth. He was not supposed to find alien spacecraft, but that was exactly what his sensors were showing. 5 objects, clearly artificial, moving in formation just beyond the edge of the solar system. They were trying to hide, using some kind of stealth technology that bent light and scattered sensor beams. But Jake had been doing this job for 6 years, and he knew his equipment better than anyone. He had calibrated the sensors himself, adjusting them to catch the smallest anomalies. Whatever was out there had made a tiny mistake, a brief flicker in their cloaking system, and Jake had caught it. He ran the data through every filter and analysis program he had, checking and rechecking his results. There was no mistake. The objects were real, they were massive, and they were definitely not human. Jake felt his heart racing as he reached for the communication panel. He had to report this, but he knew that once he did, everything would change. First contact protocols would activate, the military would get involved, and the peaceful routine of his job would be shattered forever. Captain Linda Hayes was sleeping when the emergency call came through. She woke instantly, years of military training kicking in before she was fully conscious. She grabbed her uniform and was dressed in under 2 minutes, already reviewing the initial report on her personal display as she ran toward the command center. By the time she reached her station, she had read Jake's findings 3 times and checked the raw data herself. Linda was the commanding officer of the Earth defense ship Vanguard, one of 6 vessels that made up humanity's modest space fleet. The Vanguard was a multi-purpose ship, designed for exploration and defense, armed with railguns and missile systems that seemed impressive by human standards but were actually quite primitive compared to what more advanced civilizations possessed. Linda had commanded the Vanguard for 2 years, and in that time she had dealt with equipment failures, supply issues, and the occasional reckless civilian ship that wandered into restricted space. She had never expected to face actual aliens. She assembled her senior staff immediately. Her first officer, Ben Carter, arrived within minutes, followed by the tactical officer, the chief engineer, and the science officer. They gathered in the command center, a circular room filled with displays and control stations, and began planning their response. Earth Defense Command had already issued orders. The Vanguard and 2 other ships were to intercept the unknown contacts and make peaceful contact if possible, but they were authorized to use force if threatened. Ben studied the sensor data with a critical eye. He was a thoughtful man, slow to anger but quick to analyze. He pointed out that the alien ships had their weapons powered down and their shields set to minimum strength. This suggested they were not planning an attack, at least not immediately. Linda agreed, but she also noted that the aliens were clearly trying to hide their presence. If their intentions were peaceful, why the stealth systems? The Vanguard moved out, accompanied by the defense ships Guardian and Sentinel. They traveled at maximum speed, using their fusion drives to cross the vast distance between Neptune and the location of the alien fleet. It took 8 hours, 8 tense hours during which the crew prepared for anything. Some checked weapon systems, others reviewed first contact protocols, and a few just sat quietly and tried to process the fact that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. When they finally reached the alien position, Linda ordered her ship to drop out of stealth mode and broadcast on all frequencies. Her message was simple and direct. Unknown vessels, you have entered protected space. Identify yourselves immediately. She kept her voice calm and professional, but inside her stomach was tight with nervousness. This was it, the moment that would define how humanity entered the galactic stage. Aboard the Pathfinder, Zixthar felt panic rising in his chest. The human ships had appeared seemingly from nowhere, moving faster than his sensors had predicted they could manage. The humans had spotted his fleet despite their stealth systems, something that should have been impossible for such a primitive species. Now 3 warships surrounded his position, their weapons armed and ready. Zixthar had violated direct orders from the Council, and now he was about to start an interstellar incident. He quickly consulted with Veltar and his other officers. They all agreed that fighting was not an option. Even if they could defeat these 3 ships, which was far from certain, attacking would confirm all the worst fears about the Milky Way. They would be branded as aggressors, possibly starting a war between the Council and whatever force protected this galaxy. No, their only option was honesty. Zixthar would have to explain himself, and hope the humans were willing to listen. He activated the communication system and began broadcasting on the same frequencies the humans were using. His translator device worked frantically to convert his words into something the humans might understand. "This is Commander Zixthar of the Krellian Exploration Fleet," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We come in peace, seeking understanding. We did not know this space was claimed. Please, we mean no harm to you or your people." On the Vanguard, the translation computers worked to decode the alien message. The process took several minutes, during which Linda kept her weapons trained on the nearest alien ship, ready to fire if they made any threatening moves. When the translation finally came through, she read it twice, then turned to Ben with a puzzled expression. "They are claiming they did not know this was our space. Does that make any sense to you?" Ben shook his head slowly. 5 ships do not cross into a star system by accident. They had to know they were entering someone's territory, but he paused, looking at the tactical display. Their behavior does not match a hostile force. Weapons are still powered down, shields are minimal, and they have made no attempt to run or fight. I think they are telling the truth, or at least what they believe is the truth. Maybe we should talk to them and find out what is really going on. Linda made her decision quickly. She was a military officer, trained to be cautious, but she was also human, and humans were curious by nature. She opened a channel to the alien commander and spoke carefully, knowing that every word would be analyzed by both her superiors and potentially by the aliens themselves. "Commander Zixthar, This is Captain Linda Hayes of the Earth defense ship Vanguard. You say you come in peace, but you entered our system in stealth mode with multiple armed vessels. That does not look like a peaceful scientific mission to me. Explain yourself and be honest. My patience is limited and my weapons are very much active. The conversation that followed lasted for over an hour. Zixthar explained about the Galactic Council, about the ancient warnings that had kept everyone away from the Milky Way for thousands of years. He told Linda about the data crystal and the mysterious fate of the last expedition. He admitted that he had disobeyed orders by coming here, driven by curiosity and a desire to understand the truth. He spoke about what his crew had observed, about how every species in the galaxy seemed to fear and respect humanity, even though humans had barely begun to explore space. Linda listened to all of this with growing emotions. Disbelief came first, the idea that there was a vast galactic civilization out there, and that they had deliberately avoided Earth seemed too strange to be true. But as Zixthar provided more details, shared sensor logs and communication intercepts, disbelief turned to shock. Then shock became anger. You are telling me that the entire galactic community has known about us all this time? That you have been watching us struggle and suffer and nearly destroy ourselves and no one thought to help? No one thought to reach out and say hello? Zixthar had no good answer for that. He tried to explain about the ancient warnings, about the fear that had kept the council away. But even as he spoke, he realized how hollow it sounded. They had abandoned an entire species because of old stories and vague fears. They had watched humanity fight through wars and plagues and disasters, and they had done nothing. The shame of it weighed on him heavily. Ben Carter, listening to the exchange, made a suggestion. Captain, I think we need to bring this up the chain of command. This is bigger than us, bigger than the Vanguard. If what this alien is saying is true, we need to involve the government, the United Nations, maybe everyone on Earth. This is not just first contact. This is finding out we have been isolated on purpose. Linda agreed. She told Zixthar that she was calling for a ceasefire and requesting permission to bring his ship to Earth for formal discussions. The alien commander agreed immediately, relieved that he was not going to be shot at or arrested. The Pathfinder followed the Vanguard back toward Earth, escorted by the Guardian and Sentinel. As they traveled, news of the contact spread through the human communication networks. By the time they reached Earth orbit, the entire world was watching and waiting to see what would happen next. Part 3. Dr. Amanda Pierce had spent her entire career preparing for a moment that she never truly believed would come. For 15 years, she had worked in the Xenoanthropology Division, a small department tucked away in a corner of the United Nations complex in Geneva. Her job was to think about how humanity might interact with alien species, if such species were ever discovered. She had written papers about communication strategies, cultural differences, and the psychological impact of first contact. Her colleagues sometimes joked that she had the easiest job in the world because she would never actually have to do it. Now, as she stood in a secure conference room with actual aliens sitting across the table from her, those jokes seemed like memories from another lifetime. Amanda felt her hands shaking slightly as she organized her notes and tried to calm her racing thoughts. She had dreamed about this moment, but the reality was far more intense than any dream. The alien sitting across from her was real, breathing the same air, looking at her with eyes that held intelligence and emotion. Commander Zixthar had agreed to land a diplomatic shuttle on Earth after several days of negotiations. The landing site was a military base outside Geneva, heavily guarded and closed to the public. Security was extreme. Soldiers lined every corridor, and scanners checked everyone who entered or left the building. The world's governments had moved quickly to establish protocols, though nobody was quite sure if they were doing it right. How did you prepare to meet someone from another civilization when you had no reference point for what that meant? General Frank Hayes sat at the head of the table, representing Earth Defense Command. He was a stern man in his 60s, with gray hair cut short and eyes that missed nothing. Frank had served in the military for 40 years, rising through the ranks through competence and dedication. He was Linda Hayes's father, though he tried not to let family considerations affect his professional judgment. Right now, his job was to assess whether these aliens represented a threat to Earth and to humanity's future. Zixthar looked tired. The Krellian commander had been answering questions for hours, explaining the same things over and over to different groups of humans. Politicians wanted to know about galactic politics, Scientists wanted to know about technology. Military officers wanted to know about weapons and defenses. Everyone wanted to know why the Milky Way had been declared forbidden, and Zixthar was finally ready to tell them the complete truth. The commander activated a holographic display, showing images and data from the ancient expedition. He explained that 10,000 years ago, by human reckoning, a council exploration team had entered the Milky Way to survey its resources and catalog its species. They had been careful, professional, following all the standard protocols. They had observed dozens of primitive civilizations, taking notes and samples but avoiding direct contact. Then they had reached Earth. The humans in the room leaned forward, fascinated despite their attempts to remain professionally detached. Zixthar continued his explanation, describing how the ancient explorers had found early humans living in small groups, using stone tools and fire. The explorers had been studying these primitive people from orbit when one of their team members made a critical mistake. A junior scientist had taken a shuttle down to the surface for a closer look, landing in a remote area where he thought he would not be seen. But he had been seen. A group of humans had spotted the strange craft and approached it cautiously. The scientist, panicking at the thought of violating contact protocols, had tried to leave quickly. In his haste, he had crashed his shuttle into a ravine. The impact had not killed him, but it had injured him badly and attracted the attention of a large predator. The ancient logs described it as a cave bear, a massive creature that saw the injured alien as easy prey. What happened next had shocked the expedition team. The primitive humans, who should have run away from both the alien and the predator, had instead attacked the bear. They had used their simple spears and fire to drive the massive creature away, suffering injuries themselves in the process. Then, instead of killing the strange being they had just rescued, they had offered help. They had carried the injured scientist to their camp, given him water and food, and tended his wounds with the basic medicine they possessed. The expedition leader had been forced to reveal themselves to retrieve their team member. The humans had been afraid at first, seeing the advanced technology and the strange appearances of the aliens. But their fear had been mixed with curiosity and surprisingly with protectiveness. They had refused to release the injured scientist until they were sure he would be properly cared for, even when facing beings that could have destroyed them easily. These primitive humans had stood their ground to protect someone they barely understood. Amanda felt tears forming in her eyes as she listened to the story. It was such a human response, so perfectly in character for her species. Humans had always been the type to help first and ask questions later, to form bonds with anything that seemed to need friendship. She had read countless historical accounts of humans befriending wild animals, adopting orphaned creatures, even risking their lives to save strangers. Apparently that trait went back thousands of years. General Frank Hayes had a different reaction. He saw the strategic implications immediately. "So let me understand this clearly," he said, his voice hard and controlled. "Your people discovered that humans would defend strangers and show kindness to the unknown, and your response was to declare our entire galaxy off limits and leave us alone for 10,000 years? What exactly did you think we would do if we reached the stars?" Zixthar met the general's gaze steadily, though inside he felt ashamed. The expedition leader wrote in his final report that humanity represented an unknown variable. He said your species combined traits that the Council had never seen together before. You were social like the Centaurians, but also capable of great violence like the Proxima. You formed emotional bonds like the Luminary, but you also had the persistence of natural hunters. The report concluded that if humans ever developed space travel, they would either unite the galaxy through friendship or conquer it through determination. The Council decided they could not risk contact. The room fell silent. The humans in the conference room processed this information, each reacting in their own way. Some felt angry at being judged and isolated. Others felt proud that their ancestors had made such an impression. Amanda felt a mix of both emotions, along with a deep sadness for all the years of loneliness that humanity had endured. Dr. Pierce spoke up, her voice soft but clear. "Commander, you said your people were afraid we would either unite the galaxy or conquer it, but those are not the only two options. We could also have learned from you, grown with your guidance, become better versions of ourselves. Your council denied us that chance because of fear. Fear of what we might become, not what we actually were." Zixthar nodded slowly. "You are correct, and many on the council now realize their mistake. But you must understand the context. The galaxy has seen many species rise and fall. We have witnessed civilizations destroy themselves through war or greed or carelessness. When the Council encounters a new species, they try to predict its future path. Your species was unpredictable, and that made them cautious. Ben Carter, who had been invited to the meeting because of his role in the first contact, asked a question that many were thinking. What about the other species in the Milky Way? You said there are dozens of spacefaring civilizations here. Do they know about this council decision? Have they been watching us too? The Krellian commander looked uncomfortable. The council informed other species in the Milky Way about the restriction on contact with humanity. They were told that humans were under observation and that interference was prohibited. Most species accepted this and stayed away from your solar system. A few, however, chose to watch more closely. They monitored your broadcasts, studied your culture, and formed their own opinions about your species. This revelation caused another stir in the room. Humanity had not been alone after all. They had been surrounded by neighbors who knew about them, who watched them but who never reached out. Frank Hayes felt his anger growing. It was one thing to be isolated by ignorant chance, but to be deliberately excluded by informed choice felt like a deeper betrayal. Linda Hayes, sitting next to her father, spoke with barely controlled emotion. We went through so much, Commander. We nearly destroyed ourselves with nuclear weapons. We suffered through plagues and famines and wars. We looked up at the stars and felt so terribly alone, wondering if we were the only intelligent life in the universe. And all that time you were out there watching us struggle and you did nothing. How is that any different from cruelty? Zixthar had no defense to offer. You are right to be angry, he said quietly. The Council's decision was wrong, and I say that even knowing I may face punishment for admitting it. But I can tell you this, not everyone agreed with the isolation policy. There were those who wanted to make contact, who argued that humanity deserved a chance. They were outvoted, but they never stopped pushing for change. And when I discovered the truth about why your galaxy was forbidden, I knew I had to come here, even if it meant breaking the rules. Amanda saw an opening in the conversation. Part 4 Ambassador Julie Stevens had been a diplomat for 23 years, working for the United Nations in various capacities around the world. She had negotiated peace treaties, trade agreements, and humanitarian aid packages. She had sat across tables from warlords, dictators, and corporate executives, always keeping her calm and finding ways to reach compromise. But nothing in her extensive experience had prepared her for this moment. She stood in a vast chamber aboard a space station the size of a small moon, surrounded by hundreds of alien species, about to address the Galactic Council for the first time in human history. The journey to Council space had taken 3 weeks, even using the advanced faster-than-light drives that Zixthar's people had provided. Julie had spent that time studying everything she could about galactic politics, culture, and history. She had learned about the major powers and the minor factions, about old alliances and ancient feuds. She had discovered that the galaxy was not so different from Earth in many ways. There were still conflicts over resources, disagreements about philosophy, and competition for influence. The technology was more advanced, but the basic nature of intelligent beings remained remarkably consistent. The Council chamber was designed to accommodate the incredible diversity of galactic life. The environment was carefully controlled, with different sections offering different atmospheres, temperatures, and gravity levels. Some delegates sat in chairs like Julie did, while others floated in tanks of liquid or clung to vertical surfaces. The chamber itself was circular, with a central platform where speakers addressed the assembly. High above, holographic displays showed translations in hundreds of languages simultaneously. Julie walked to the central platform, her shoes making soft sounds on the smooth floor. She wore a simple blue suit, professional but not overly formal. She had debated wearing something more elaborate, something that would make a strong impression, but Amanda had advised against it. Be yourself, the scientist had said. Show them a real human, not a costume or a performance. So Julie had chosen an outfit she felt comfortable in, and she carried with her a small tablet containing her prepared remarks and supporting materials. The council speaker, an entity named Harmonix who appeared to be made of living crystal, called the chamber to order. The sound Harmonix made was like wind chimes mixed with deep bells, and the translation came through clearly in Julie's earpiece. We gathered today to address a matter of historic significance. Humanity, a species from the forbidden Milky Way galaxy, has made formal contact with galactic civilization. Ambassador Julie Stevens of Earth will present humanity's case for recognition and membership in the Galactic Council. Julie took a breath and began to speak. Her voice was steady, though her heart was racing. Honored members of the Galactic Council, I stand before you today not just as a representative of my government, but as a voice for all of humanity. We are a young species, still learning about the universe and our place in it. But we are also an old species, with a history stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. We have survived ice ages and plagues, wars and disasters. We have built civilizations and watched them fall only to build them again. We are persistent, curious, and hopeful. These are the qualities that define us, and these are the qualities we bring to this council. She paused, letting the translations catch up. Around the chamber, delegates watched with various expressions of interest, skepticism, and curiosity. Julie continued, addressing the core issue directly. I know that many of you have been taught to fear humanity. You have heard stories about our violence, our unpredictability, our dangerous combination of traits, and I will not stand here and lie to you. Humans can be violent. We have fought terrible wars among ourselves. We have done things we are not proud of, but we have also shown incredible compassion, creativity, and courage. We are a species of contradictions, and that is precisely what makes us valuable. A delegate from the Thaxian Empire, a powerful reptilian species known for military prowess, stood up to challenge her. The Thaxian's name was Krexnor, and his voice was harsh and suspicious. Ambassador Stevens, you speak of contradictions as if they are positive, but contradictions mean unpredictability, and unpredictability means danger. Your own history shows countless examples of humans turning on each other without warning. What guarantee can you give that you will not bring that same violence to the wider galaxy? Julie had expected this question. It was the fundamental concern that had kept humanity isolated for so long. She looked directly at Krexnor as she answered. I cannot give you guarantees, Commander Krexnor. No species can honestly promise they will never face conflict or make mistakes. What I can tell you is that humanity has learned from our violent past. We have created international laws, peacekeeping forces, and systems of justice designed to prevent war. We are not perfect, but we are trying. And more importantly, we believe that contact with other species will make us better, not worse. She activated her tablet and projected images on the holographic displays around the chamber. The images showed humans in various situations. Rescue workers pulling people from burning buildings, medical teams treating wounded soldiers from both sides of a conflict, scientists from different nations working together on research stations, parents teaching children to be kind to animals, volunteers helping strangers during natural disasters. Julie let the images speak for themselves before continuing. This is who we are, she said, her voice filled with emotion. Yes, we can fight, but we would rather save. Yes, we can be suspicious of strangers, but we would rather make friends. Yes, we can be destructive, but we would rather build. The council kept us isolated because you feared what we might become, but by keeping us alone, you may have prevented us from becoming our best selves. Give us a chance to prove we can be trusted. Give us a chance to contribute to galactic civilization. Give us a chance to learn from you and to share what we have learned. A delegate from the Luminari, a peaceful species that communicated through patterns of light, asked a gentler question. Ambassador, what does humanity hope to gain from joining the council? What do you want from us? Julie smiled slightly. That is a fair question, and I appreciate your directness. Humanity wants knowledge. We want to learn about the technologies and cultures that you have developed over thousands of years. We want to explore the galaxy and discover new wonders. We want to trade goods and ideas, to form friendships and partnerships. But we also want to contribute. We have our own unique perspectives, our own innovations, our own ways of solving problems. We believe that diversity makes everyone stronger, and we want to add our voice to the galactic conversation. The debate continued for hours. Different delegates raised concerns, asked questions, and challenged Julie's statements. Some were hostile, clearly opposed to allowing humanity into the council. Others were curious, willing to give humans a chance but wanting assurances. A few were actively supportive, believing that isolation had been wrong from the start. Julie answered each question as honestly as she could, never pretending that humanity was perfect but always emphasizing their potential. General Frank Hayes watched the proceedings from a viewing gallery, accompanied by Linda and several other human observers. They could not participate in the debate directly, but they could see everything that happened. Frank felt pride watching Julie handle the difficult questions with grace and intelligence. But he also felt frustration. The council was treating humanity like children asking permission to sit at the adult table, and he resented the dynamic. Linda sensed her father's mood and spoke quietly. "They are scared of us, Dad. Not because we are powerful, but because we are unknown. They have spent 10,000 years building their civilization on predictability and careful planning. We represent chaos to them, the wild card they cannot control. Julie is doing the right thing by showing them we are more than just chaos." Frank nodded but remained troubled. What happens if they vote no? What if they decide that humanity should remain isolated? Do we accept that decision or do we challenge it? I am not sure I am comfortable with aliens deciding humanity's future without our input. Amanda Pierce, who was also in the viewing gallery, offered her perspective. "The council cannot enforce isolation anymore, General. The secret is out. Humans know about the galaxy now, and we are not going to just forget that knowledge. Even if the council votes against formal membership, we will continue to develop space travel, continue to explore, continue to make contact with other species. The only question is whether that contact happens with the council's blessing or against their wishes." Back in the council chamber, Julie was making her closing arguments. She had been speaking for over 3 hours, and she was tired but determined to finish strong. "Members of the council, I understand your hesitation. I understand your fear. But I ask you to consider what you are really afraid of. Are you afraid of human violence? Then work with us to channel that energy into protection of the innocent and defense of the weak. Are you afraid of human persistence? Then give us goals worth pursuing and watch us achieve things you thought impossible. Are you afraid of human bonding? Then accept our friendship and discover that we are loyal allies who will stand by you in difficult times." Part 5-6 months had passed since the historic vote that granted humanity provisional membership in the Galactic Council. In that short time, the world had transformed in ways that would have seemed like science fiction just a year earlier. Earth now hosted 3 permanent alien embassies, with more being constructed every month. Human ships equipped with gifted faster-than-light drives were exploring nearby star systems, making first contact with the other civilizations in the Milky Way. Trade agreements were being negotiated, cultural exchanges organized, and scientific collaborations established at a pace that left everyone slightly overwhelmed. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, the sensor operator who had first detected Zixthar's fleet, found himself in a position he never could have imagined. He was now stationed on a joint research facility orbiting Jupiter, working alongside scientists from 6 different species. The facility was massive, a spinning wheel of modules and laboratories where beings from across the galaxy collaborated on projects ranging from theoretical physics to agricultural development. Jake's specialty was sensor technology, and he had been paired with a Krellian scientist named Velmar to develop improved detection systems. Velmar had been part of Zixthar's original expedition, a young researcher who had been fascinated by humanity from the moment they arrived. He had requested assignment to the Jupiter station specifically to work with humans, eager to learn more about the species that had caused so much controversy. Jake and Velmar had become friends quickly, bonding over their shared love of technology and their tendency to work late into the night when they got excited about a project. They were in the sensor lab, reviewing data on human technological development, when Velmar made an observation that surprised Jake. "Your species advanced incredibly fast," he said, pointing at the timeline displayed on their screen. "You went from the first powered flight to landing on your moon in only 66 years. Most species take at least 300 years to make that same leap." The council members who feared your rapid advancement were not being paranoid. They were being accurate in their assessment. Jake leaned back in his chair considering this. "Yeah, but look at why we moved so fast. It was not because we wanted to conquer anything. We went to the moon because President Kennedy said we should, and we did it partly to beat the Russians, sure, but also because we looked up and wondered what was there. Pure curiosity drove us, same as it drove you to cross into the forbidden zone. We are not so different, you and us." Velmar's expression, which Jake had learned to read after months of working together, showed thoughtful agreement. "Perhaps that is why I find working with humans so comfortable. You approach problems the way I do, with questions rather than assumptions. Many Krellian scientists are very methodical, very careful. They follow established procedures and rarely take risks. But you humans, you try things just to see what happens. It is refreshing, if occasionally alarming. They both laughed and Jake returned his attention to the screen. The data showed something interesting. Human technology had certain unique characteristics that puzzled alien scientists. Humans tended to build things that were adaptable rather than specialized, capable of multiple functions rather than perfectly optimized for one task. This made human designs less efficient in some ways but more versatile in unexpected situations. Jake wondered if this reflected something fundamental about human nature, the tendency to value flexibility over perfection. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Captain Linda Hayes was overseeing a very different kind of transformation. The Earth Defense Fleet was being upgraded with alien technology, a process that required careful negotiation and extensive training. The Galactic Council had agreed to share basic propulsion systems, defensive shields, and communication equipment, but they had placed strict limits on military technology. No advanced weapons, no offensive systems that could threaten Council members. Humanity was welcome to defend itself, but not to become a military power that might upset galactic stability. Linda stood in the orbital shipyard where the Vanguard was being rebuilt. The ship that had made first contact now looked very different. The old fusion drives had been replaced with quantum displacement engines that could push the ship to faster-than-light speeds. New shield generators surrounded the hull, capable of deflecting energy weapons and small projectiles. The communication systems had been upgraded to handle the complex protocols used by galactic shipping. The Vanguard was no longer a primitive Earth vessel. It was a proper interstellar ship, capable of traveling to any system in the Milky Way. Her father, General Frank Hayes, visited the shipyard to inspect the progress. He walked through the rebuilt ship with Linda, examining every change and asking detailed questions about capabilities and limitations. Frank had been appointed as the head of Human Space Command, a new organization responsible for coordinating all human activities beyond Earth orbit. It was a massive responsibility and he took it seriously. "How does she handle now?" Frank asked as they entered the bridge, which had been completely redesigned with both human and alien input. Linda smiled with pride. "Like a dream, Dad. We ran test flights last week and the crew could not believe the difference. We reached Alpha Centauri in 18 days. Do you understand what that means? A journey that would have taken decades with our old drives now takes less than 3 weeks. We can explore the entire local cluster, visit the other civilizations in our region, actually participate in galactic society instead of just watching from the edges." Frank nodded, but his expression remained serious. "That is good, but we need to be careful. The Council is watching everything we do. Some species still think we are dangerous, that we will abuse the technology they have given us. We need to prove them wrong, show them that humanity can be responsible stewards of advanced systems. One mistake, one incident where we use these ships aggressively, and we could lose everything we have gained." Linda understood his concern. She had been in enough council meetings to know that humanity's provisional status was fragile. There were delegates who had voted against recognition and who were looking for any excuse to revoke it. There were also species who simply did not trust humans, and who monitored their activities with suspicious attention. Every human ship, every human action in space was being watched and judged. But Linda also believed that the best way to earn trust was through action, not caution. "We are not going to earn respect by hiding in our solar system, afraid to make mistakes," she told her father. "We need to get out there, explore, help where we can, show the galaxy what humanity is really capable of. Yes, we will probably mess up sometimes, but we will also do amazing things, and those amazing things will speak louder than any fears or doubts." Across the galaxy, Ambassador Julie Stevens was working to make Linda's vision a reality. She had established a permanent human embassy on the council station, and she spent her days meeting with delegates, negotiating agreements, and building relationships. Julie had discovered that galactic politics was not so different from Earth politics. It was all about understanding what people wanted, finding common ground, and building coalitions of support. One of her most important projects was establishing trade relationships. Earth had limited resources to offer at first. Human technology was primitive by galactic standards, and human culture was unknown to most species. But Julie had found something that many alien civilizations wanted: human creativity. Artists, musicians, writers, and designers from Earth were creating works that fascinated alien audiences. Human stories, with their focus on individual struggle and emotional depth, resonated with species who had very different cultural traditions. Julie arranged for cultural exchanges, sending human performers to alien worlds and bringing alien artists to Earth. She organized joint research projects where human scientists could offer fresh perspectives on problems that had stumped galactic experts. She worked with human companies to develop products that met galactic safety standards and could be sold in alien markets. Slowly, carefully, she was weaving humanity into the economic and cultural fabric of galactic civilization. She also faced challenges. There was an incident where a human exploration ship accidentally entered restricted space and triggered a diplomatic crisis. There were trade disputes when human merchants did not understand complex galactic regulations. There were cultural misunderstandings that sometimes caused offense. Julie spent long hours mediating these problems, apologizing when necessary, explaining when possible, always working to maintain the fragile goodwill that humanity had earned. One afternoon, Julie met with Commander Krexnor, the Thaxian military leader who had challenged her during the council vote. She had invited him to lunch at the human embassy, hoping to build a better relationship with one of humanity's most skeptical observers. Krexnor arrived precisely on time, his military bearing evident in every movement. They ate together, sharing food from both their worlds. Julie had learned that Thaxians valued directness, so she addressed the tension between them immediately. "Commander, I know you voted against humanity's membership in the Council. I know you have concerns about our species. I would like to understand those concerns better, and I would like to show you that they might be unfounded." Part 6. 5 years had passed since Commander Zixthar had crossed into the Forbidden Zone and changed the course of galactic history. The Milky Way galaxy, once isolated and mysterious, had become one of the most dynamic regions in Council space. Human ships traveled freely between the stars. Human traders did business on 100 worlds, and human culture had spread throughout galactic society in unexpected ways. The transformation had been so complete that younger generations could barely remember a time when humanity was not part of the galactic community. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of Research Station Kepler, watching ships come and go from the busy spaceport. The station had grown significantly since he first arrived, expanding from a single wheel to a sprawling complex of modules and docking bays. Beings from dozens of species moved through the corridors, working together on projects that would have been impossible just a few years ago. Jake had been promoted twice and now supervised an entire department of sensor research, managing teams of both human and alien scientists. Velmar entered the observation deck and stood beside his friend, following his gaze out into space. "Thinking about how much has changed?" the Krellian asked, his translator rendering the words in perfect English. Jake nodded without looking away from the view. 5 years ago, I was sitting at a lonely monitoring station, thinking my biggest discovery would be an interesting asteroid. Now I manage research teams working on sensor technology that will be used across the galaxy. It is surreal, honestly. Sometimes I wonder if I am dreaming all of this. Belmar made the sound that Jake had learned meant amusement. "If you are dreaming, then I am trapped in your dream, and I would prefer to be in my own dreams, where the food is more familiar and the gravity is properly calibrated. No, my friend, this is real. We are living through a historic transformation, and we are lucky enough to be part of it." They watched in comfortable silence as a human cargo ship docked with the station. The ship was a new model, sleek and efficient, built using a combination of human engineering principles and alien technology. It carried goods from Earth, everything from agricultural products to entertainment media, destined for markets across the galaxy. Human exports had become surprisingly popular, particularly food items and cultural products that offered novel experiences to alien consumers. Jake thought about his family back on Earth, how his parents had reacted to the news of his promotion and his work with alien species. His mother had been proud but worried, concerned about the dangers of space travel and the risks of working with unknown technologies. His father, a retired engineer, had been fascinated by the technical details and kept asking questions about how the alien systems worked. Both of them had adjusted to the new reality of a galaxy filled with neighbors, though it had taken time. The entire human population had gone through a similar adjustment period. Some people had embraced contact with enthusiasm, excited about the possibilities of trade, travel, and cultural exchange. Others had been more cautious, worried about losing human identity or being exploited by more advanced civilizations. There had been protests, debates, and conflicts about how humanity should interact with the galaxy. But gradually a consensus had emerged. Humanity would engage with the galaxy on their own terms, maintaining their culture while learning from others, defending their interests while seeking cooperation. On Earth, Captain Linda Hayes had taken on a new role. She was no longer commanding the vanguard, having been promoted to admiral and given responsibility for the entire exploration fleet. The fleet had grown from 6 ships to 43, a mix of Earth-built vessels and ships purchased or leased from alien manufacturers. Each ship had a mixed crew of humans and aliens, a policy that Linda had championed, despite some resistance from traditionalists who wanted all human crews. She stood in the headquarters of Human Space Command, reviewing reports from various exploration missions. The data was encouraging. Human ships had discovered 3 new habitable planets, established friendly relations with 2 previously isolated species, and completed successful trading missions to 17 different systems. There had been no major incidents, no conflicts, no reasons for the Council to doubt humanity's readiness for full membership. General Frank Hayes, now in his late 60s but still sharp and energetic, entered her office without knocking. Linda smiled at her father's continued disregard for protocol. Some habits never changed, no matter how much the world transformed around them. Frank carried a data pad with news from the Council station, and his expression suggested the news was important. "The Council has scheduled the review," he said without preamble. 3 months from now they will vote on whether to grant humanity full membership. Julie thinks we have the votes, but it will be close. We need to make sure nothing goes wrong between now and then. Linda nodded, understanding the stakes. 5 years of good behavior, 5 years of proving ourselves, all leading to this moment. What does Julie need from us? Frank consulted his pad. She wants a comprehensive report on our activities over the past 5 years. Exploration missions, trade agreements, cultural exchanges, everything. She also wants representatives from various human organizations to testify about the benefits of galactic membership. Scientists, business leaders, artists, regular citizens who have been affected by contact. She wants to show the Council that humanity has embraced membership and thrived under it. Linda began making notes, thinking about who would be best to represent humanity's achievements. Jake Morrison would be perfect to talk about scientific collaboration. There were human merchants who had built successful businesses serving alien markets, artists whose work had been exhibited on dozens of worlds, teachers who had established exchange programs between Earth schools and alien educational institutions. The challenge would be choosing from so many good options. Meanwhile, Ambassador Julie Stevens was preparing for the most important presentation of her career. She had spent 5 years building relationships with Council delegates, earning their trust through consistent honesty and demonstrated reliability. She had mediated disputes, facilitated cooperation, and worked tirelessly to show that humanity deserved full recognition. Now everything came down to a single vote, a single chance to make the case that humans were ready to be equal partners in galactic civilization. She met with Zixthar, who had become a close friend and advisor over the years. The Krellian commander had been promoted to admiral as well, and he now served as the Council's liaison to humanity. They sat in Julie's office, reviewing the strategy for the upcoming vote and discussing which delegates might still be undecided. Zixthar was optimistic, but realistic. "You have strong support from the Luminari, the Centaurians, and most of the peaceful trading species. They have benefited from human creativity and innovation. The military powers are still cautious, but even they have to admit that humanity has not shown aggressive tendencies. The real question is the conservative bloc, the species that simply resist change and prefer things to stay as they have always been." Julie sipped her tea, thinking about how to reach those conservative delegates. What do they fear most? What argument will resonate with them? The Krellian considered carefully before responding. They fear instability. They fear that change will lead to conflict, that new members will disrupt the carefully balanced system that has maintained peace for thousands of years. You need to show them that humanity adds stability, not chaos. Show them that humans solve problems rather than creating them. Over the next 3 months, Julie worked with teams of humans and supportive aliens to prepare the most comprehensive case possible. They compiled data on every positive contribution humanity had made to galactic society. They collected testimonials from alien citizens who had been helped by human assistance or enriched by human culture. They created detailed projections showing how human membership would benefit the entire galaxy, economically, scientifically, and culturally. The day of the vote arrived with a mix of excitement and anxiety felt across Earth and human space. Billions of people watched as Julie once again took the stage in the Great Council chamber. She had spoken here before 5 years ago, as a nervous diplomat making humanity's first case. Now she stood as a confident ambassador, representing a species that had proven itself worthy. Honored members of the council, Julie began, her voice clear and steady. 5 years ago, you took a chance on humanity. You granted us provisional membership, allowing us to participate in galactic civilization under observation and with restrictions. Today I stand before you to request that those restrictions be lifted, that humanity be granted full membership with all the rights and responsibilities that status entails. She activated the holographic displays, showing the evidence of human achievement. Ships exploring distant systems and making peaceful contact with isolated species. Human doctors working in alien hospitals, treating patients from dozens of different worlds. Human engineers helping to repair damaged infrastructure after natural disasters. Human artists collaborating with alien creators to produce works of stunning beauty. Human teachers sharing knowledge with students across the galaxy. We have not been perfect, Julie continued. We have made mistakes, caused offense through ignorance,